Hello, 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 everyone. This is another episode of Emerald Lake Books Live. I hope that you are enjoying your day-to-day wherever you are in the world. Last week, we talked about how to find podcasts that you might be able to pitch your story to in order to be able to be a guest on their show. And my friend Catherine Avery mentioned afterwards that, gee, wouldn't it be great then to have podcast hosts talk about what it is that they look for when a guest pitches them a story. So I decided to bring together some of my good friends that are podcast hosts because I don't do that. I much prefer being on somebody else's show than dealing with all the shenanigans of putting a show together and getting it syndicated out there and distributed. I have other things that I need to work on distributing, like books. But the great thing about having friends that know how to do these things is being able to bring them on and share their expertise with you as well. So I am going to introduce you to each of these individuals. So far, I'm going to start off first with Catherine Avery, and I'm going to turn this off so that I can go over and read her bio. Now, Catherine, this is really interesting. She empowers busy professionals to conquer their daily tasks, paperwork, and efficiency. Her sweet spot is helping people who have brain difficulties, whether it's a processing issue, chemo brain, ADD, or a brain trauma. A former queen of clutter, she implemented proven strategies that get you on a more productive and profitable track. Combining her design sense with streamlined systems and business acumen, she helps her clients master their time, space, and information. A recovering type A Wall Streeter and cancer survivor, thriver, she knows that time is more valuable than money. And she has a podcast that is called the Uncluttered Podcast, and we'll learn more about that as we go along, I'm sure. And next up, I'm going to introduce you to my friend Robert Imbriale. Robert is somebody that I have worked with many times over the years and is a dear friend of mine. Robert got a very early jump on his career. When just 16 years old, he got his hands on his very first computer. That was in 1980. By 1984, Robert was already online, and by 1989, he had begun selling online, nearly 4 years prior to the World Wide Web becoming available to the public. Looking to take his career to the next level, he found his next mentor, Tony Robbins, and in just a few years became the head coach and coach's trainer for Anthony Robbins and Associates. Robert left the corporate world in 1995 when he realized his vision was much bigger than any regular job could satisfy. Today, Robert trains coaches in all areas of business, including how to be a better coach, and is the host of the Coach's Corner podcast. And I'm sure we'll be talking more about that as we go along as well. My third guest today is Deb Krier. Deb, I have had a lot of fun. I've been on her podcast a couple of times. Deb is a marketing professional, social media advisor, professional speaker, and trainer. Since 2011, Deb has hosted the Business Power Hour, and she absolutely loves talking with her guests about a variety of business topics. Her primary goal for the program is to give professionals the tools they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. Deb is president of Wise Women Communications, LLC, a full-service marketing and public relations firm. She has an MS in Communications Management and an MBA in Business Management, and her show is called the Business Power Hour. And so I am going to bring us all on for just a moment, and here we all are. Say hi, everybody.
Now this is
Brady
fun.
Bunch. Marsha,
All right.
Marsha.
So today we are going to talk about what podcast hosts want most from their guests. And so I've done the introductions, and I'm going to scroll down to the first question that I have that I'm sure that authors will want to know is, how do you find your guests? And so I just am going to do this as an open forum. Let's just have a conversation, enjoy riffing off one another. And so does anybody want to start first?
It's riffing, not ripping, right?
It's riffing.
Okay,
It's
just
riffing.
want to be sure. Want to be clear.
It's Friday afternoon. What the
That's
heck?
right. We're having fun on Facebook today, and that's great.
Let's rip off some people.
All right. So how do you find guests?
So I'm fortunate in the fact that my program has been on long enough that guests come to me. We're actually booking 4 months out on programs. So, they come to me. I do on occasion see something, maybe somebody's written a book that I'm interested in, or done something. And so I do approach them. But for the most part, people are coming to me.
Great.
I'm a mix. I both do by myself on the Uncluttered Office podcast, and then other times I have guests. A lot of the time I tap my friends, people who I know, business colleagues I've known a long time who I'm super comfortable with. I am just at the point where I'm booking about 2 months out for guests. And I am also, I also make sure I have themes each month. And people are coming to me. I've had about 5 people request in the last month and a half or so. So I'm getting that traction. I think I'm on my 40th episode so that people can get a sense of how long it takes to gain traction.
All right. And
Yeah,
Robert, that means
it's
you're
kind
up.
of the same. Yeah, well, the same for me. I mean, people will reach out and contact me. I tend to be sort of picky about who I bring onto my podcasts, and kind of have to make sure that I'm not going to get someone who's going to give me an hour ad. I really want to spend time with them learning and sharing great information, because that's one of the challenges you have, is you got to really, vet these guests. And so they'll reach out to me. Oftentimes they'll find me on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, and they'll send me stuff. But I will also reach out to people that I really want to interview. And it's interesting when you put the words interview request when you're reaching out to someone, that email gets opened.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I can definitely understand how that would happen. So my next question has to do with, what are you looking for in a guest? I mean, Robert, you touched on the fact that you don't want it to be an hour-long ad, but what makes one guest more appealing than another?
Well, I would definitely start the. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Robert.
No, that's the big part of it. It's like you want to make sure that they are who they say they are. There are a lot of people who are wannabes. I spend a lot of time in the coaching industry, and there are a lot of coaches, honestly, without a lot of training. And they call themselves a coach. And that's the last person that I want to have on the show, because I don't want them to be giving out, theories. I think this might work. Hey, how about you try this with your relationship? That kind of thing. I really want people who have, been there and been in the trenches, like I've been in the trenches for many years doing this. And so I really have to vet them. And that's really where I spend my time. What I do, first thing I do is I go to their website and I look for videos, right? I want to see how they appear on camera, because my podcast is video and audio. I have 2 versions of the podcast. So, are they good on camera, or are they sort of mousy on camera? They don't show up well, or maybe they don't have the right gear and they can't be a great guest for me. So it is a little bit of a process for me doing it. I know a lot of people don't do this. And if you're just doing an audio podcast, it's fine. Get somebody on a cell phone. It's good enough. My needs are a little bit different.
Okay. Who's next?
I'm going to say, even though I'm still a relatively small podcast, I am super picky about who I bring on. And the 4 people who've applied in the last month and a half, only one have I thought they are a pretty good fit. But I'm concerned because when I'm looking at what they're doing, they're promoting a product that might be in competition with me or might align. I'm still not 100% sure. And I've really just pretty much said, call me in April, just to get them to the side. The other thing I'm doing, and I think this is really worthwhile, and I am not someone who has had it to this point because I didn't have people contacting me, is to have a form, maybe even just through SurveyMonkey or whatever type form, that would be for people to fill out as they're asking to be on the show. And that's next on my agenda. In fact, tomorrow morning, Saturday, to get that set up so that when people ask, I can just send them that form, they can fill it out, and then I can begin to ascertain without spending hours doing my own research.
How about you, Deb?
Well, I already have the form, so that, and I'll tell you, that definitely really does help. It kind of pre-vets them. It makes sure that they're serious enough to do it, that they're going to fill out the form and answer the questions. It shouldn't take anybody more than 5 minutes to do this. I mean, this isn't, give me War and Peace. But if they can't do that part, then they're, we don't even consider them. I do have a producer. And so that helps because she looks at what they have sent. So she's looking at their website. She's doing various things. I have had recently, it's been interesting, 2 people who I was their very first podcast, and they actually did wonderful. I always go in a little bit nervous with people like that, especially for them doing a first and having it be an hour long. But they both did fine, and that was great. But yeah, it's, you want to double check to make sure that they can do and say what it is that they can do or say.
Yeah, so I think that makes an interesting point. If an author is going to be approaching you to do a podcast, they should Google kind of what they're going to come up as and how they look to you, so that they know what you're seeing when you're going to vet them for being on your show. All right. So what do you wish every podcast guest knew?
Do your research. I went back and watched your program from last week, and that was great. I mean, you had so much good research there and so many great tips. But the thing for me is I want to know somebody actually went to my page for my podcast, and we do video also. But, I want to know that they went there and that they know at least a little bit about the program, and have paid attention to it, because I do get pitches every once in a while from somebody that is just simply not going to be a good match, because they didn't bother to even go to the page and see what it is, or they don't follow the instructions. That's my other big bugaboo is, if you're not going to follow the instructions and give me the information that I request, I'm not even going to consider you. So do your research in advance.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I know I had intended to put into last week's episode, but when you're doing all the technical stuff at the same time on your own as doing the show, is I often recommend listening to at least snippets of a few different episodes to get the flavor and the character of the show as well.
I would agree with that 100%. And I found that when I'm going to go be interviewed on someone else's show, I do go and listen. I might pop it on while I'm in the car and listen to 2 or 3 episodes just to get a sense of what the questions could be. I do actually offer questions to my guests. So prior, I give about 5 questions and say, this is approximately what we'll be talking about. This is this month's theme. And then I do expect them to be ready to answer those questions because I sent them to them.
That makes sense. That's kind of doing your homework.
Yeah. Prepare for that test.
Robert, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, I play with them a little bit too, and I have this idea in my head. Instead of me being the host and sort of controlling everything and controlling every question, I kind of make them the co-host in a way. And I'm looking for people who are a master of their content. People will submit, here's some prepared questions, and right away I go, I'm not using those because that's not the kind of podcast that I want to do. I want something that's more genuine, more authentic, and coming from the heart. So when I reach out to them, I say, hey, why don't we do this instead of thinking of it as an interview? This is a thing that it's been on my list for a long time. Let's not do an interview. I'm not here to make you look good. You're not here to make me look good. Let's do something for the people who are listening. Let's do this really as a mini course instead. Let's get into a topic and let's start talking about the topic, and let's bring up some content that our listeners are really going to get value out of. And they can walk away and say, you know what, that Coach's Corner podcast, that was pretty good. I'm going to come back next week.
Right.
Definitely. So my next question, you may come up with something different. It may just be more of the same, but what would make you reject a potential guest?
Definitely if they don't pay attention. If I ask them, and I've been known to reject people once we've even had them scheduled because they don't follow my instructions, and my instructions are there so that we have the best possible interview. With an author, one of the biggies, they want to talk about their book. They need to provide me a copy of their book because I read them. Now maybe not absolute word for word and take notes type of thing, but I do really read them. And, and an e-version is perfectly fine. You don't need to send me, definitely don't need to go to the expense of sending me a physical book. But if you're an author and you want to talk about your book, you need to get me a copy of your book, and more than the day before. I need several days to prepare for it.
Yeah, that was one of the things I really enjoyed about being on your show when we did Publish with Purpose, is it was clear that you'd read the book. You were bringing up points specifically from the book. And as an author, that's something that, having a podcast host do that for you is just amazing, because it is showing that podcast host audience that the host was invested enough in this interview to be able to do that. Right. And so it says a lot about your character and what you're willing to put into the shows as well. Does anybody have any other answers they want to add?
2 quick things. The first is to go back to the idea that I actually send these questions out to folks. It's really food for thought, so they can think about how it fits in and what they might want to talk about. And then, of course, one of my questions is always, is there something you want to talk about? Go ahead and feel free to pop me some things you want to discuss while you're on. The ones that I reject, I find, are the ones who are coming from these large agencies that are booking people onto podcasts, and they're just not a fit for my topic. They might be talking about cleaning supplies for your home, and I'm talking about an uncluttered office. Unless those cleaning supplies are something used in a office space, that's not really a good fit.
Or if they want to be an advertiser.
Well, and I did have someone come on who really spent all of his time talking about what he wanted to talk about, and had to keep kind of guiding.
Reeling them back in. Mhm.
Yeah, I think a good guest is always going to make it easy for the podcast host. And they're gonna provide them with as much information up front as possible, but they're also gonna stay on track. And sometimes that means being on the show to not necessarily talk about your book, but things that tie into your book. And so a lot of the shows that I've been, I mean, Robert, you and I have talked many times about, marketing books and how to go about marketing books and why a book is important for a business, and eventually tied it back into a book that one or the other of us have written, but that wasn't the focus of the show. And I think when you're an author trying to be a guest on a podcast, you need to make sure that you understand the needs of that show and what that audience is looking for. If it's a book related and book focused podcast, go for it, talk about your book, but otherwise tie it into concepts that are in the book, and make it relevant to that audience.
Well, you could see too, if you watch the news and you watch when they bring on their guest experts, right? All these people, this so-and-so guest is an author of such and such a book, and then they do the interview, they never talk about the book. Right. And the reason that they don't talk about the book is they're there to provide that guest information. That's really, I try to get away from that and say, hey, let's talk about your book. Let's talk about what you wrote here on page 15. Let's talk about this. It's just not that interesting for the viewer. So I'd prefer to have them come on as a guest expert, and let me hit them with questions that are a little bit out of left field. Let's really bring up some content. Let me have them audition so that when someone's watching or listening to the podcast, they go, this person's a real expert, and they will follow up and get the book. We'll mention the book at the end. Absolutely. And at the beginning too.
Definitely. This has been a lot of fun. So I'm going to ask my final question, which is, what question didn't I ask that I should have? What do you wish people knew?
Respond quickly. I mean, when we ask for information, please give it to us. And don't think, oh, I can wait or postpone it or do whatever, because we can. Especially if we're not working too far out. I have times where I'm recording a program that I'm going to air the next day, and if I can't get you to respond, then you're going to get the please let it be known that we're going to be rescheduling you message. And now if you've got plenty of time, that's a little bit, but 24 hours, don't let it go more than that. And, it really is something that, if I'm asking you for information or asking you for something, it's because we need it to have the best possible interview for you, the guest.
I think that's really important, and I think one of the things that I look at doing is the same as, I need your information back. I'm spending time, so I go to someone's website and I research them. My most recent guest was someone I never would have thought would be someone I would interview. She says something really brilliant on Facebook, and I thought, wow, she'd be fabulous for this topic. This is great. And then I researched about her. So I don't write these 5 questions or so out of the air. I write them out of me doing the research. So I'm expecting people will research back.
Yeah, that is a big thing. We look at, you're inviting a guest on board, and I give them a document, a PDF, and clearly that they didn't read it because they show up and it's like, oh, I need a webcam for this. Yeah, it's a video interview. We kind of need a webcam. And then they'll do things like, well, I'm on a cell phone, I'm on Wi-Fi, I'm in Starbucks. Right. And it's like, you're just not prepared. And then I won't do the interview. Or it's happened in the past where I've actually done an interview and found that the content wasn't good enough and I didn't publish it.
Robert, you provide the most specific technical information before a podcast guest is on, down to, making sure that you're plugged into with an Ethernet cable and not on Wi-Fi and all these different things, even giving recommendations on what web camera to use. It's just, it's amazing, but so incredibly valuable.
Right.
And
because people are thinking, well, I can do it with this. No,
I can't.
Yeah. I think too, one of the things is actually just show up early, test out your stuff to make sure that you're connecting right. You need time to be able to make sure that there's no technical issues. Robert and I, we got to the end. So Robert was gracious enough to be on Publish with Purpose Virtual Summit last year. And we had a great interview together. And yet we ended up with technical difficulties and had to do it a second time. And, so we didn't, the thing is that we did an entire hour interview and then found out that we had technical difficulties and had to do it a second time. So in that instance, I needed a better computer than I had at the time because there just wasn't enough go-go juice in it to be able to handle 2 videos at the same time. And so, I have something that eventually I'll take just the audio and strip that out. And the content was great. But for the actual summit, we needed to have, we needed to record it again.
I discovered today when I logged in that my browser wasn't going to connect and I was using Firefox. When I switched to Chrome, then it worked. And luckily you had said, be there early. And so we discovered that I was going to have to do that.
Well, I'm glad to know what exactly was causing the difficulties, because next time I'll include that in my instructions ahead of time to make sure you're in Chrome. I don't even think about using any other browser at this point in time. It's my go-to. Well, I wanted to just take a moment to thank you each for being on. This has really been helpful to me, and hopefully the authors that listen to ELB Live, this also goes out in my YouTube channel as well, will find it useful as well. And thanks so much for being a part of this. I'm just going to wrap up here for a quick moment and say that, if you need any help with any of these things, if you're trying to figure out exactly how to position your content, your book in a way that podcast hosts will find helpful, feel free to reach out to us at emeraldlakebooks.com. Our short URL is elbks.com. And I wanted to let you know that next week we will have another guest, and this is going to be Dolores Hirschman. She's going to come on and talk with us about creating a TEDx talk from your book. And that's something that I know a lot of people are very interested in doing. So be sure to tune in for that. And in the meantime, thank you all for being on. I really appreciate the value that you provided to my audience. And thank you for all the times that you've worked with me on various projects. I've had a lot of fun with each of you.
Great. Thank you so much.
So, signing off for now. Take care. Bye.